I'm Steve Duckett, and I'm a trustee of the HDA, and my wife Sandy is in stage 4 of Huntington's disease. My connection with Huntington's disease is through Sandy and her family. Sandy's mum and her grandmother were both sufferers, and Sandy and I have been together since 1969, so I've been associated now nearly 50 years with the disease. Her mother was sectioned in the early 70s, and we've been living with it ever since. I've been a carer for probably longer than I thought I've been a carer, because the disease in Sandy's case was quite subtle in the way it started. So the first symptoms were around behaviour. It meant that I didn't really recognise that as a symptom. Even though I knew something about Huntington's, I didn't really recognise, and I thought we were just going through the usual bad patch that you go through in marriages. It's only on hindsight I realised that her original symptoms were around behaviour. So I started, I think, my journey on that, which is quite a subtle change from just being aware to, as I am now, full-time carer doing everything I can. And I retired from work 3 years ago specifically to look after Sandy when her needs became too significant really for her to be left on her own. The support I get as a carer is quite varied. I have family that I use, so when I need that space or that respite, I've got 2 sisters who will always look after Sandy. Sandy's got some good friends that she's been friends with since she was at school. And I suppose in terms of myself, I'm quite self-sufficient. I've always been quite self-motivated, so I don't tend to call upon a lot of support for my own sort of well-being, if you like. But it's and the other thing I get a lot of support from is our local community neurological service. I sit on the Community Neurological Service steering board, so I have a kind of direct contact with them on a regular basis. And we're very lucky in Dorset to have a really good team that meets all those other needs. I think it's really important to have an understanding of Huntington's disease to be a carer. It is such a complex disease. It is so variable. There is a saying that once you've met one HD patient, you've met one HD patient. And that's the challenge, is that you need to have just that understanding really at the start of the journey. I was late coming to understanding. Had I had that understanding at the beginning, I would have dealt with it much better than I actually did. I made a lot of mistakes along the way. Been there, literally bought the t-shirt. And as I've got more involved with the disease, and my understanding has grown, I have, in hindsight, realised what I've done wrong, but it's also put me in a good position now to start getting prepared for things that are going to happen. There's a fairly inevitable journey. The only thing you don't know is when. So I'm a great believer of having tools in my box that when I need to build that bridge, I've done the research, I know what I'm doing. So at the moment, this week alone, we've looked at non-verbal communication with an iPad app that allows Sandy to type in phrases that are then spoken out. We've been to orthotics to look at a gel insole to help her with the support. We've had the dietitian in this week to talk about peg feeding when we need it. She's not there yet, but I know that I'm comfortable in the knowledge that I've done my research. I know when it comes, it won't be a crisis, it won't be a panic, we'll all be done. So that's kind of, that's the sort of the way I think that knowledge does. And again, I think, as I said earlier, the issue is it's so variable in so many people. So you've just got to be aware of what might or might not happen, and go with the flow. The difficulties I faced as a carer really around finding the kind of support I need when I need it. We have a personal assistant that comes in twice a week, so I get 12 hours respite a week. But she has other clients, I need to give her notice of when we're going to need her, so we have that regularly. If I have a day other than that, we have a backup care agency, but I need to give them a month's notice. And that's the difficulty, because sometimes opportunities arise for me to go and do something within a few days, and I struggle then to get care for that particular issue. That's really the only area I've got. I suppose as well that there is a bit of a battle that goes on in terms of education of the medical profession. It's a rare disease. We've had 3 or 4 GPs. None of them had dealt with HD before. So you have that initial kind of education bit to try and let them understand exactly what's going on and how you're going to treat it. And again, because there's no dedicated medicine for it, you're always on a trial and error basis around that. It's a constant journey of experimentation to do that. Because I'm now retired, I find the role is now my job. That's what I do. I'm a full-time carer. When I was doing, my full working week as well as doing those initial care, so that was a challenge. So it's got easier in that sense. But I think I'm getting older, and therefore physically I have limitations now, and I'm pretty tired quite a lot of the time. I don't have that resilience that I had when I was younger, and it's a strange thing, isn't it? When you're young, you have kids, you have the energy to be with your kids, and with Huntington's, as people progress through the disease, you're almost stepping back to that. And so the requirements to feed and water and shower and everything else are like they were when children, but you don't have that energy, you don't have that resilience anymore. So I do find that's an issue as I got older, definitely. And just physical things like lifting her and carrying her. There's going to be a time when I'm not going to be able to do that anymore, and that's a concern. That's a concern. I look after my own well-being needs by being fairly selfish. We get a carer in twice a week, and I go and play golf. I've got a couple of good friends that I've known for 30 odd years. It's 4.5 hours or 5 hours for me to just forget what I do and recharge my batteries. This is saying that I get great pleasure out of playing golf, because it's not always, a pleasurable experience when I'm not playing very well, but just that being away from that care, and having that responsibility taken off your shoulders just for that shorter period of time. I find at the moment that's enough, but I'm getting to the stage now where, as I'm now 3 years into the full-time job, I'm wanting a bit more. But I have a bit of a guilt thing going on here about, as I would say, dumping my wife on other people, so that I can have some sort of time to myself. I think, if I look back and I'm honest, I was quite a selfish person, and I've had to learn not to be selfish now. But I'm having to kind of go back now and try and be a little bit more selfish, because that's what people are telling me I've got to do. I've got to be selfish to protect my own kind of well-being. And I'm quite bullish when I go to the doctors. If I've got an issue, I'm quite openly saying, I am a full-time carer. If you don't sort me, if I can't get an appointment for 3 weeks, you're going to have to find somebody to come in and look after Sandy, because I'm not going to be capable of doing it. So you kind of you become a little bit more focused on that, and you understand that your role is a really important one. I look after my own physical health in a couple of ways. Getting out and playing golf is good for me. We've got a small dog, and I walk the dog, and I do try and get Sandy out every day. And that's quite physically challenging, because I make her walk, so I support her. And I find that a fairly short workout is keeping my cardiovascular health in pretty good state. So, interestingly, my blood pressure has dropped dramatically since I left work. And I think my health has actually improved. I haven't got the stress levels I had when I was working. So that's helped me in a way to deal with that. So there's that balance between sort of physical exercise. I've got to be honest, I'm pretty lazy. I was never one for training for the sake of training. I envy people who can do that, but that's not me. So I find that, just getting out and doing some walking, I garden quite a lot, which I quite enjoy. It keeps me going. I do quite a lot of DIY, so I'm on my feet quite a lot as well, so that helps. So I'm not a couch potato, and to be quite blunt, when you're a full-time carer, you don't get the chance to be a couch potato anyway. So it's a case of that, balancing that physical exercise and balancing diet as well. That's really crucial. And I find sometimes that's my only weakness, is that sometimes when I've had a busy day, I may sit down at the end of the day with chocolate and crisps and a bottle of red wine, and that's not great for me. And I need to look after that particular aspect as well. I do access peer support, but strangely, and I'll be careful I say this, because I'm always been fairly self-sufficient, I tend to be in a position where in the past people have come to me. I do a lot of research around stuff. I think I'm quite knowledgeable about Huntington's, and because I'm now, I think Sandy's been symptomatic for about 16, 17, 18 years. I'm quite experienced with dealing with quite a lot of the stages of that now. So I find that actually when I go to these peer support groups, I'm quite often a person that other people will come to. And that's pretty much been the way I've kind of led my life. There will probably come the odd time where I've got certain friends that I can open up to. So just days that when things build up, as they inevitably do, and you just need to scream or thump the wall or something, there's a couple of people I know that I can go and just chat to that don't judge, don't ask, and just sit and listen. And I find that hugely beneficial to do that. It doesn't happen very often, but it's just nice to have that little pressure valve there to be able to just turn that off when you need it. I find talking about Huntington's disease to people who aren't familiar really easy. In fact, I could be a bit of an HD bore. I will never miss an opportunity to tell it. And there was a challenge for me because I generally introduce my wife. This is Sandy. She's got Huntington's disease. So I take the initiative a lot. I was a bit concerned at the beginning because I was concerned about whether Sandy was comfortable with that. She is absolutely comfortable. And it's helped us tremendously because it gets past that wondering and an issue. And we've had a few instances where there's been a bit of prejudice about her, some comments being made. But I find generally people are actually, once you say that, they're actually quite interested because they've kind of picked it up. There's been a bit on television in certain programmes or bits they've read in the press or it's been on the news. And so they're quite interested to talk about that. And we've had instances where quite often people have come across to us. We were at Wimbledon this year and a lady was in the queue of the disabled toilet, came back, said, "Can I just ask you, have you got Huntington's disease?" And we said, "Yeah." She said, "You're funny, I'm a nurse in Kent who's with the special on Huntington's." So it draws people in, and if you're open about that and honest about that, the response we get is fantastic. Sandy's got a really good bunch of friends that meets in the Cozy Club once a month, and they just take her and they take her off and they take her to places and they go away for weekends and they're all in the kind of group. It's that fantastic uniqueness about the Huntington community. I don't know what it is, I can't explain it, but everywhere I go and you get into that group, there is that real supportive sort of bonhomie around that. So I find it easier and easier. And I think as the awareness has raised its head as well, because it has, because of all the research stuff, you're finding a lot more people are interested in the disease. It's a fascinating disease. It's really complex and it's fascinating, and there's an incredible history around it as well. And once you get into that and get time, people are really quite educated and really do thank us afterwards, because they're now more knowledgeable, and the more that we can spread the word out there, the better it's going to be for the future. Life teaches us lots of lessons, and I think that it's almost beholden on you that if you've been there and you've been through that process, to share that out, because that's going to help somebody else along the journey. Our local branch, we often get newcomers in, and the one thing we say to them is ask questions, because if you've got a problem, I can guarantee there'll be somebody in this group who's been there, who's bought the T-shirt, who's got that. And as I said earlier, sometimes it just helps to talk about it. I remember when we did the end of life plan, that kind of got to me, because I sat there and we wrote it all out, and I thought, God, this is my life. This is going to be my life for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And it's quite a difficult thing to do. But having gone through that, it does help you to prepare yourself. So there are no surprises. There will always be surprises in it, because you just can't judge how it's going to go. You can't without. But you've got that preparedness, you've got that understanding of that. So I think it's absolutely invaluable to kind of share those experiences out. And again, the more you talk about it, the more the awareness raises, and the easier it is for people with HD to live in the normal community. If I was giving advice to somebody in my position, I think it would depend where they are in the journey. I think if somebody was at the beginning of the journey, I would be saying to them, get as much information as you can. Talk to as many people as you can. Get the network around you now, because you don't know when you're going to need it. It might be this year, it might be next, it might be 10 years, but get that around you. And if I met somebody who was in exactly the same position as me, with somebody who is, stage 4 or 5 now, who's struggling to speak now, who is going to be struggling to eat soon, I would say get that really tight support around you. Get that group of people who you know are going to be there, whatever, because it's a tough gig. It's a tough gig, and you can't maintain it all the time. We're doing, in a way, a professional's job, because the kind of stuff that I do would be 20, 30, 40 years ago would be something that would have been done probably in an institution somewhere, and life has changed so much. So now the onus is far more on spaces, carers, within the community to deal with stuff there. So you need to really kind of look after yourself, which is the first thing, and make sure you get that very close network of friend range for those days when you just need that shoulder to cry on.